Welcome back to another episode of Break the Silence, and I'm your host, Syborg. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for clicking on the video. If you would, don't forget to like and subscribe this video if you like the video. Let's get straight into it. We just watched Game 5 of the Boston Celtics versus Miami Heat, in which the Boston Celtics took a 3-2 series lead by beating the Miami Heat 93-80. The first relatively close game we've had in the series. Wasn't all that close in the fourth quarter, but closer than the other games. So the first one, most of us have stayed up for the whole game. Other than, Game 3 in Boston when the Celtics had 24 turnovers. But interesting game tonight. I'm going to break it down a little more than I have the previous games because I think this game has a little more analysis linked to it. But I would like to start with a thought I had today when I was thinking about the Boston Celtics, and I heard someone describe them as the Jekyll and Hyde team of the playoffs. And I thought about that. It means they're really good and really bad, Jekyll and Hyde. But my thought was, I would call them someone that were a little more recognizable to the modern human being, to our modern day sports fan. And that's Kanye West. The Boston Celtics are the Kanye West of the NBA. When they're at their best, when they're at their peak, as Jayson Tatum would say, I'm top 5. What are you top 5 in? I'm top 5. And that's how you feel about Kanye West. When you listen to some of his albums, some of his music, some of the influence he has on music and culture, you would start to have him in the top 5, top 10 of the GOAT conversation. And then sometimes you hear Kanye West in an interview and you're like, this guy's an idiot. This guy, something's going on. Some of his music is horrible. Some of his more recent music, most of his more recent music is horrible. And that's what I feel when I watch the Boston Celtics. There are times you watch them and they play defense at such a level that you're like, this is the best defense I've seen in the last 15 years. The offense is good enough to make it the best team in the NBA. And then there are also times you watch them and you're like, this team is a disaster. They have to get a ball handler. They have to work on things in the offseason. They have so much room to improve. And this game was really a perfect barometer of everything I just said. In the first half, the Boston Celtics were a disaster. The Heat had a 5-point lead at the half, which I said was the closest it's been in any conference final game so far this year, which is just absurd because we've had 4 in the Western Conference and now 5 in the Eastern Conference. So these games are not even close. But the Boston Celtics, and specifically Jaylen Brown, turned it over 5 times. He turned it over 5 times in the first half and was a disaster dribbling the basketball to the point where I was like, do you get this guy out of the game? Like, is he more of a liability than a positive? And the Boston Celtics stuck with him. And that paid off because in the second half, Jaylen Brown turned it around and really redeemed himself from that first half. Jaylen Brown finished with 25 points, was the leading scorer on the night, and hit some big shots really to close that game out and not let the Miami Heat get back in that one. And kind of got the big lead as well. Jayson Tatum, to me, looks a little off. There is something going on with his shoulder, and they're not talking about it very much. But Jayson Tatum doesn't miss free throws. And for most of the second half of the season, he wasn't missing wide open threes the way he is right now. So I think there's something going on. I don't know if it's a nerve thing or what exactly that is. But Jayson Tatum is going to have to be at an A+ level if they want to compete in the next series, if they make it to the next series. Obviously, we're not moving past this one. But if the Celtics want to have any chance at winning a title this year, Jayson Tatum has to be an A+ player. Tonight he had 22, 12, and 9. So he gave you some production there. And if you noticed in the first half, Jayson Tatum was like, well, I'm the best ball handler on the court. So I'm going to focus on getting my teammates involved, and he did that pretty well. So he finished the game with 9 assists. That, to me, is where Jayson Tatum has shown so much growth than in previous years. Jayson Tatum has become a very good passer, and he didn't need to be LeBron. He didn't need to be Magic Johnson, John Stockton. What he needed to be was know how to play within the team confine to where he could get his shot when necessary, but he could also get his teammates involved so that they can win these games. Let's flip to the Miami Heat side because I think that's the more interesting part of what we watched tonight. Jimmy Butler shot 4 of 18, including in the fourth quarter a couple air balls in a row, and the Celtics were pretty much just daring him to shoot the basketball. Now, I don't know if he is injured, or my deeper suspicion is that Jimmy Butler is having something going on up here as far as internally with the organization. And I don't know if it's with players, coaches, or what exactly. But what we've seen from Jimmy Butler's career is that he has a shelf life. In Chicago, he lasted a couple years and then kind of needed moved. Then he got moved to Minnesota. Didn't last very long there. He really clashed with some of the players. Then he moved to Philadelphia, and then he had to move to Miami from there. And then earlier in this season, we saw Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra get into a shouting match on the sideline. And we thought maybe it wasn't a big deal because of the way the Heat kind of responded. They finished with the 1 seed. They dominated in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, even though I don't know that they played much competition in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So you kind of thought, maybe everything's fine. But with the way Jimmy Butler played in games 1 and 2, it's so hard to understand how badly he's played in games 3, 4, and 5. Game 3, he left with an injury, so maybe that's what's ailing him. But he looks so off. He doesn't look like... Jimmy Butler has this innate ability to not be a great shooter, not be flashy, but he just gets like the job done. And it just doesn't look right to me. I don't know. Keep that monitored. I'm interested to see if this series ends Friday night, if we start to hear any grumblings this offseason. Something I would keep my eye on. I'd like to move on to 2 other guys in the starting lineup. Kyle Lowry and Max Strus. Your 2 starting guards gave you 0 of 15 shooting. Kyle Lowry looks terrible. If they would have played Gabe Vincent, they would have had a way better shot in this particular game, in my opinion. Kyle Lowry is a wreck. And you give some credit to the Boston defense, but also Kyle Lowry had multiple times where he had a wide open 3, where I've seen Kyle Lowry hit those shots when he was in Toronto. I don't know if he's washed or it's the injury. With him, I would lean a little more of the injury, but I don't know why you're playing him and forcing to play him when he's only been terrible in this playoffs. So if I'm the Heat, my adjustment is I'm sitting Lowry down. I'm starting Gabe Vincent. I don't know if I'm playing Max Strus because in 2 games he hasn't hit a shot. And what the strategy that the Heat decided to really go with to get the offense going was just have Duncan Robinson come in and just run back and forth off of screens. That's all they did. It was like their go-to play in many situations, and Duncan Robinson just isn't hitting. We'll see if he can get going because Duncan Robinson scares me. Honestly, he's the guy who scares me most on the Heat. So if he can get going, then maybe they can, even the series up in Boston next game. But otherwise, I don't know that they have enough offense on the court. Because Kyle Lowry and Max Strus just, I don't think at this point are giving you anything. Jimmy Butler, I don't know what's going on. Bam kind of is who he is. He's somewhere between a 15 and 20 point a game scorer. I don't know if Tyler Hero's coming back or not, but I just don't know that the Heat have the firepower to compete in this particular series. But we're going into Game 6. As a Celtic fan, I feel pretty good about our chances in Game 6. I felt better about this series than I did the previous one. I just think when the Celtics don't turn the ball over, they're a really effective team. And, You see that directly from the numbers. The Celtics have the worst fast break defense per 100 possessions out of the 4 remaining teams, but they have an elite level half court defense. They have the best half court defense per 100 possessions of the remaining teams. And that shows the importance of the Celtics taking good care of the basketball, which they have not done in some games this series. But if you let the Heat get out and run and get easy buckets, then you're in a ball game. But if you don't, then they finish with 80 points because they have no half-court offense. So that's when we talk about the Celtics turnovers being such an issue. That's why. Because when you have an elite level defense, turnovers are so costly because otherwise they're not scoring the basketball. You saw the Celtics last series against Milwaukee. Their half-court offense was 10 points per 100 possessions worse than it was in the regular season. And that just builds upon the point. Keep good care of the basketball, and the Celtics will take this series in Game 6. They'll move on to face the winner of the Dallas Mavericks Golden State Warriors, which is going to be the Warriors based on every statistical thing ever because they were up 3-0. But we move on. I'm pumped. Syborg out.